Happy to have with us today Douglas Holtz-Eakin, the president of the American Action Forum and also a former director of the Congressional Budget Office and chief economics advisor to the John McCain presidential campaign. Doug, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
We are on the eve of presidential address before a joint session of Congress where President Biden is expected to unveil his American Families Plan, expected to run anywhere up to $1 trillion, perhaps a bit more. It's giving some credence to that tweet that Senator Kristen Gillibrand offered a couple of weeks ago, in which she said, for which she was roundly criticized, paid leave is infrastructure, childcare is infrastructure, caregiving is infrastructure. Well, indeed it is, right?
Yeah, it looks like they're going to encompass a wide array of social welfare spending as, quote, infrastructure. I think for folks who want to understand the real structure here, just go back to the campaign. They had something called the, quote, Build Back Better campaign. And that plan was the combination of what has been rolled out as the American Jobs Plan and now the American Family Plan. But it's all of that big spending proposals. And on the campaign, $3.3 trillion in tax increases.
Right. And this is, of course, on top of the other infrastructure, the more traditional infrastructure plan that the president unveiled some weeks ago, $2.25 trillion, designed to address transportation and the Green New Deal issues. Your thoughts about that?
Well, the claim is that you can raise taxes, which I think we can all agree would be detrimental to the growth of the economy, both in the recovery from the recession and then over the longer term, but that if you spend it, quote, wisely, you can offset that damage and grow robustly and will be just fine. And that becomes the issue. And I think you can make that case if you targeted a highly productive traditional infrastructure on roads, bridges, ports, airports, water supplies, things like that. But that's not where they're targeting their spending. There's some of that plus other things. And most analysis, including the work we've done at the American Action Forum, suggests that this will lower growth in the economy. We'll end up worse off after 10 years than we would have if we did not do this. And so they've got a problem with the basic framing of this, which is infrastructure is good and we're going to get jobs. It's not infrastructure and there aren't any jobs.
Mm-hmm. What is the mechanism by which this is going to hurt the economy? Delve down into that a little bit.
Well, in the end, if you take this approach, you're going to raise taxes. Centerpiece of the first round of this is corporate taxes. So raise the top corporate rates, raise the overall global minimum tax, add a new tax on the book income of corporations. But you raise a bunch of taxes and use those taxes to take resources from the private sector and spend them in the public sector. That's the goal. Well, if the rate of return in the private sector is 10%, the rate of return in the public sector is 5%, and those are CBO's rough numbers, you're losing 5% on every dollar you move across the line. And they're moving a lot of dollars across the line. And cumulatively, it has an impact on the economy.
Mm-hmm. Biden has said that this would not affect any wage earners who make less than $400,000 a year. But that does not include small businesses, many of whom file their taxes as individuals.
Look, there's no way to insulate everybody who goes to work in the United States from a tax change as large as the one they are proposing. In the end, it will affect saving, investments, growth. It'll affect productivity, and that's what you get paid. A lot of small businesses sell to large corporations. If large corporations are being taxed more heavily, it hurts their market. We are all interconnected. And so these large policy changes are ones that affect everybody. And you cannot make the claim that you're insulating those under 400,000 from their negative impacts.
Have you ever seen in your life, in your experience in Washington, spending at this level? And it raises a second question. You've been in Washington for many, many years. You're quite familiar with Senator Biden. How does the Senator Biden compare to the President Biden when it comes to spending taxpayer money?
Well, certainly, Senator Biden believed in paying for things. And if he's intending to stick to that, he's going to have to come up with spending proposals that are less ambitious because these are so far beyond the normal scale and scope for Washington that they require enormous tax increases to finance them. And the combination will be quite detrimental to the future of the U.S. I mean, we have a real issue already with the federal budget. To add these programs on top and widen the structural deficits is a dangerous move on the part of the administration.
Do you think President Biden is making this course correction in his career of his own volition, or is somebody else calling the shots?
Oh, you have to assume the president of the United States has the final say. But I think it's been clear that the Democratic Party has been pulled far left by the progressive wing, that as a matter of the politics of even getting things through Congress on Democratic votes, he needs to move left. And so we're seeing that. And this isn't, I think, what he was elected to be, but it is what he thinks he needs to do to be successful in office. And so these proposals are really quite dramatic.
Well, you just mentioned in that statement that he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in some respects, and it has actually nothing to do with Republicans. You've got Senator Joe Manchin on one side, who's now getting some cold feet about this latest infrastructure proposal. And then you've got, as you mentioned, the far left wing of the party, which is pulling him to spend more money.
Yeah, I mean, this is, put Republicans aside and just start counting votes in the House of Representatives, for example. They can only lose, 3-4 votes at any time. And so you have to keep the progressive wing on. So that means you've got the recently elected, very, very progressive members, and you have more traditional members. And somehow you have to get them on these proposals. That's hard. That's very, very hard work. Then you get over to the Senate, where you have, again, a chasm as wide as from Joe Manchin to the most liberal of the Elizabeth Warrens and others. And filling in the gap between those parties is a very hard thing. So a lot of attention has been paid to the Republican Democratic split. That's real. But the bigger problem is the Democrats have to get on one bill themselves.
Mm-hmm. Writing in the Washington Examiner today, an economist by the name of Alexander William Salter, professor of economics at Texas Tech, wrote this: the problem with Keynes' system, and he's assuming that this Biden proposal is indeed a Keynesian economic proposal, is that it collapses under political pressure. Keynes' theories gave politicians an excuse to do what they've always wanted to do in the first place, spend without limit. But those same politicians would never choose to spend less, even after the economy recovered. Keynesianism, in practice, is a one-way fiscal ratchet. It destroyed the intergenerational social contract, saddling future generations with crippling debt before they could defend themselves at the ballot box. What's your take on that?
I don't disagree with that. I think that the basic framework has been badly abused in practice. It's been oversold in both its effectiveness and timeliness, and certainly we never see the part we're supposed to see, which is when times are really good and the economy is booming, the government cuts back so that on average it's not borrowing all the time. We don't see that. We instead see large continued deficits. I just want to point out that there should be no need for, quote, stimulus / Keynes behind the American Jobs Plan or the American Family Plan that's about to roll out. They had a $1.9 trillion, nearly $2 trillion American Rescue Plan pass in March. If you can't solve the stimulus problem and the jobs problem with $2 trillion, it won't get solved. And there's nothing left to be done with these next bills. These are about restructuring the role of the government in the economy, period. They're not about stimulus, not about recovery. They're about their vision of how big a government we should have, how invasive a government we should have, and the bills are just that.
To that point, Doug, it seems to me that the economy is already hurting in some respect as it's attempting to regain the pre-pandemic momentum by the fact that people are being offered this stimulus money, these repayments from the pandemic, which is more than many people are making by going to work. So a lot of business owners, especially those in the service economy, are finding it really difficult to get workers because they're getting more money by staying at home.
It's a good observation. And again, the, quote, stimulus argument, the Keynesian approach to policy, is about people not having enough money to spend. It's about demand. That's not the problem. The problem has been the virus has made it impossible to supply some goods and services. You can't supply a restaurant meal because it's not safe. You can't supply a ride on an airplane because it's not safe. Well, as that goes away, you don't want to introduce new supply problems. And if you're paying people enough to stay home and make more than if they go to work, you're creating supply problems. Our problems have all been on the supply side, and these dollars on the demand side aren't going to make a difference. Do you have
any communication with the Biden administration and its economic advisors? Any influence at all? No.
Many are longtime professional colleagues, and I have spoken with some of them. Yes.
And can you share any insights, any exchanges?
No, I guess I would never do that. If they in good faith want to ask my opinion on something, I in good faith will tell them, and they can use that as they see fit.
Okay. Last question for you, Doug. There has been almost no attention paid, neither in the Trump administration or in the Biden administration, to debt and deficits, which is just ballooning at an astronomical rate right now. What's your worst fear?
My worst fear is that the average American is blissfully unaware that we have a problem. I mean, I think your point is right. If you go back to George W. Bush, who I worked for, there was some concern about deficits and debt, but really we had to prosecute the war against terror, and we had to win that war. You listen to President Obama for 8 years. There was nothing wrong with the federal budget that couldn't be fixed by taxing rich people. Listen to President Trump for 4 years. You didn't hear anything. Now you hear essentially the argument that more debt's a good thing. We just need to spend, and borrow to do it. Why would the average person be concerned about the federal budget if 4 consecutive presidents have not told them to be a little bit concerned? And that's a problem, because when the time comes to get serious about this, and that time is coming, it means changing big spending programs. It may mean more tax revenue, and those are things people aren't going to like. And if they don't know why it's being done, there's going to be a real problem. And so that's my concern, is that we are not educating the American people about where we stand really. And we stand with the highest level of debt relative to the economy in American history, not just in wartime, and in American history, and a trajectory that's unsustainable. That's just bad news.
Well, I wish we could end on a happier note, but we got to deal with reality at the same time.
That's the reality.
Douglas Holtz-Eakin, from the president of the American Action Board. Thanks very much for your time. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.